Kato stared at the stack of overdue bills on the kitchen table, her hands shaking. For years, she juggled 4 jobs, scrimped every penny, and sacrificed her dreams to pay her parents' debts. Yet, the moment her parents' luck turned, when they won the lottery, they acted as if she never existed. Her sacrifices, her sleepless nights, and her blood, sweat, and tears didn't matter. But Kato had learned something invaluable. Sometimes, the world only notices when you stop playing by its rules. Kato woke up before the sun every day, her body already tired but her mind focused. She rushed to the cafe to serve customers, then ran to the retail store in the evening, and later stayed up late tutoring students just to make extra money. On weekends, she delivered packages across the city, her feet sore and her hands calloused. Through it all, her friend Amara would visit when she could and shake her head in amazement. "How do you do all this?" Amara would ask, and Kato would only smile tiredly. Kato never complained. Even when her body screamed for rest, she felt proud when she saw her parents' debts slowly getting smaller. And that tiny progress gave her strength to keep going. In quiet moments, she imagined a little art studio filled with colors and canvases, a place where she could finally breathe and create. But the reality of bills and responsibilities kept that dream locked away. Her parents never noticed the nights she went hungry or the hours she spent working herself to exhaustion. They rarely said thank you, but Kato kept moving forward anyway, silently carrying her burden, and hoping that someday her sacrifices would matter. One evening, Kato's parents were glued to the television, shouting and jumping around as the lottery numbers appeared. Her heart sank as she realized they had won. The very debts she had spent years paying off suddenly seemed meaningless to them. The next day, they went out and bought a shiny new car, booked a luxury vacation, and started planning expensive dinners, as if the years of struggle never existed. Kato tried to tell them she had spent nights working multiple jobs to keep them afloat, but they waved her off, laughing and saying, "We earned this, we can do what we want now." She felt invisible, like all her pain and sacrifice had vanished overnight. The parents who once relied on her for everything now acted like they didn't need her at all. They strutted around the house with new clothes and fancy gadgets, talking about their freedom, ignoring the nights Kato had cried herself to sleep, exhausted from endless work. Her trust in them shattered completely. The people she had spent her youth supporting, feeding, and sacrificing for suddenly looked at her, as if she was just a stranger in their home. Their laughter and excitement felt like a wall, pushing her out emotionally, leaving her confused and hurt. Kato sat quietly in her room, staring at the bills she had worked so hard to pay, now laughing in her face through the irony of their lottery win. She realized, painfully, that the parents she had loved and given everything to had changed overnight. They no longer valued her, and worse, they acted like she had never mattered. Every long night, every aching muscle, every penny she had saved seemed invisible now. The dreams she had of small joys, of a studio where she could paint, felt like a distant memory, crushed under the weight of their sudden wealth. She felt betrayed, not by strangers, but by the people who were supposed to love and support her. Their joy was loud and careless, and it pierced her heart. The realization that her sacrifices no longer held any importance made her stomach twist. She wanted to scream, to shake them and make them see, but she had learned long ago that her voice was ignored. For the first time, Kato truly felt the cold truth. The people she had carried on her back now acted like she was unnecessary, like she had never mattered. And in that moment, something inside her began to awaken, a quiet, burning resolve that maybe, just maybe, she no longer needed them either. Kato sat at the dining table, her hands trembling as she tried to find the right words. "I worked for you. I paid off your debts. I sacrificed everything for this family," she said, her voice shaking but firm. Her parents looked at her, eyes cold and dismissive. "We earned this money ourselves, Kato. Don't act entitled," her father said, waving a hand as if brushing away her years of struggle. Her mother nodded, busy on her phone, completely uninterested in the pain she had caused. Kato felt her chest tighten, a heavy weight settling over her. She realized suddenly that all the work she had done, all the nights she had stayed awake, all the money she had saved, meant nothing to them now. They didn't see her efforts, her tears, or the nights she went without sleep or food. They only saw themselves celebrating, and she was invisible in the story of their new lives. The next day, She tried to access the family accounts to check some finances she had managed for them, but she found her permissions had been removed, her emails went unanswered, her suggestions ignored, and every attempt to speak up was met with silence or irritation. It was like she had been erased from their lives overnight. Amara, sensing her friend's despair, put a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Kato, maybe it's time to walk away. You've given them everything, and they don't even notice. You can't keep hurting yourself for people who don't care," she said softly. Kato wanted to believe her, but a part of her clung to hope. Family was supposed to matter, right? She had always believed that blood meant loyalty, love, and respect. Yet now, she felt none of those things in the people who were supposed to care for her the most. The mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness stirred something deep inside Kato. She realized that no matter how much she sacrificed, no amount of loyalty would make them see her worth. Their wealth and pride blinded them, and her efforts had no place in their world anymore. For the first time, she understood that she could not rely on them to value her or her sacrifices. This painful truth shook her to her core, but at the same time, it lit a spark inside her, a quiet, burning determination to take control of her own life. She could no longer allow herself to be silenced, dismissed, or treated as if she were nothing. That day, as her parents ignored her and Amara urged her to step away, Kato began to awaken. She began to see that her life, her future, and her happiness could not depend on people who had never truly cared. She realized that the real power was in her own hands, and maybe, just maybe, walking away from them was the first step toward freedom and self-respect. Kato packed a single bag and left her parents' house that morning, the apartment key cold and heavy in her hand. She found a small, modest place in the city, just enough space for her bed, a small table, and her few belongings. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and that thought made her heart beat faster than it had in years. The streets outside buzzed with life, and for the first time, she felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. She was on her own, fully responsible for herself, and the thought was both terrifying and freeing. The first week was difficult. Kato didn't have a big plan or a wealthy backer, just her skills, her determination, and a quiet anger that pushed her forward. She started small, taking art commissions from local clients and friends, painting portraits, and designing small murals. Each brushstroke reminded her of her dreams she had locked away for years. She also looked online for freelance projects, writing content, editing, and offering consulting for small businesses. Every small job felt like a victory. Every payment, no matter how little, made her chest swell with pride. For the first time, she was earning for herself, not to bail someone else out, and the feeling was intoxicating. Some days, she felt exhausted, unsure if she could keep it up, but the independence, even in tiny doses, gave her a taste of freedom she had never experienced. She began to understand that financial independence wasn't just about money. It was about respect, control, and dignity. She didn't have to beg for acknowledgement. She didn't have to wait for permission to pursue her dreams. And she didn't have to shrink herself to fit someone else's world. Even small wins felt monumental. A client complimenting her work, a new project coming in, seeing her savings grow just slightly. It all reminded her that she was capable, strong, and resourceful. For the first time, she felt a flicker of real hope. She realized that her parents' neglect and dismissal could no longer define her life. She didn't need their approval or recognition. She only needed herself. The taste of autonomy was scary at first. No one was there to rescue her if she failed. No safety net, no familiar home to retreat to. But each challenge she faced made her stronger, and each small success made her hunger for independence grow. Kato smiled one evening, looking at her little apartment, her brushes and laptop scattered around. She felt something she hadn't felt in years: control. This was her life now, messy and uncertain, but fully hers. And for the first time, she knew that taking this first step away from her parents wasn't just a move. It was the beginning of reclaiming her power, her dignity, and her dreams. One sunny afternoon, Kato nervously set up her small display at a local art gallery. Her paintings, bright and full of emotion, were carefully arranged on the walls, each one a piece of her heart. She had never expected anyone important to notice her work. This gallery was small, the crowd casual, and her little business just starting. But then, a tall man in a sharp suit stopped in front of her largest painting. He studied it quietly, his eyes moving slowly over every stroke, and Kato felt a strange mix of pride and nervousness. "These are remarkable," he said finally, his voice calm but full of certainty. Kato looked up and saw his face, a man who carried the kind of presence that demanded attention. He introduced himself as Amari, a businessman with investments across the world. He didn't just see her paintings, he saw the effort, the late nights, and the determination behind them. Unlike her parents, he didn't dismiss her. Instead, he asked questions about her process, her goals, and how she managed everything on her own. Each answer Kato gave seemed to interest him, and for the first time in years, she felt truly seen. Amari didn't just compliment her work. He offered something unexpected, a mentorship and a business partnership. He spoke of ways to scale her art, to turn her talent into a profitable venture, to reach audiences far beyond the city gallery. Kato's mind raced. Could she really trust someone with her dreams, with her work, with her heart? After years of giving everything to people who ignored her, the idea of trusting anyone felt risky. But something about Amari was different. He wasn't looking for shortcuts or control. He genuinely wanted to help her succeed. For a long moment, Kato just stared at him, her hands trembling slightly as she realized what this could mean. She could expand her art beyond small commissions, reach new clients, build a name for herself, and finally step into the life she had always imagined. Yet skepticism lingered. She had been betrayed before, and opening her world to someone, even a kind, wealthy investor, felt dangerous. Still, hope sparked inside her, tiny but persistent. Amari smiled, as if reading her hesitation. "I can see your dedication, Kato. I've met many artists, but few work like you. If you're willing to take a chance, I can help you grow. Not just your art, but your future." The words lingered, warm and heavy with possibility. Kato felt a shift inside her, a glimmer of excitement she hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, this was the break she needed. Maybe someone finally believed in her, not because of duty or family, but because of who she was and what she could do. As she shook his hand, Kato felt her chest fill with a new energy, a mix of hope, courage, and determination. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an opportunity. And this meeting, this unexpected encounter with a man who truly saw her worth, was the first step toward a life she could finally claim as her own. With Amari's guidance, Kato slowly began turning her passion into a real business. She started producing more art, not just for galleries but for clients who admired her work online. She organized small workshops for beginners, teaching painting and creativity, sharing the techniques she had learned on her own through years of practice. She even started posting videos of her process, showing people how she turned simple ideas into beautiful pieces. Each project she completed, every class she taught, added to her confidence. Her skills grew stronger, her style more unique, and her name began to spread quietly but powerfully in the local art scene. Kato worked tirelessly, pouring her heart into every detail, but this time it was different. The effort felt meaningful, not forced, because it was her own. She didn't wake up to pay someone else's bills or chase approval that would never come. She woke up to create, to grow, and to build something that belonged to her. Slowly, word of her talent reached beyond the gallery and her small circle of clients. People admired her dedication, and requests for commissions started to increase. Her workshops filled up, and her videos were shared online. Every small success, every compliment, felt like a quiet victory, a reward for the years she had sacrificed for others. Meanwhile, her parents began to hear whispers about her growing reputation. Neighbors mentioned seeing her art featured in local exhibitions. Online friends talked about her workshops and videos. Slowly, the realization sank in for them. The daughter they had ignored, the girl they dismissed, was now building a life they had never imagined. It made them uneasy. They felt threatened, not because they were proud of her, but because they could not control her success. The idea that Kato, whom they had treated as unnecessary, was thriving without them challenged everything they believed about their authority and influence over her. Kato noticed the subtle shift, but it no longer affected her. The satisfaction she felt now was different from anything she had known before. It wasn't about recognition from her parents. It was about proving to herself that she could rise above neglect and betrayal. Each day she spent painting, teaching, and creating digital content added a layer of pride she had never experienced while drowning in debt. For the first time, she felt free to enjoy her own achievements, to measure her worth by her efforts and results, not by the opinions of those who had once dismissed her. The more she grew, the more confident she became. Every success reminded her that she had always been capable, even when no one believed in her. And with each passing day, Kato's determination solidified into a powerful force, propelling her forward into a future that was finally hers, fully earned and beautifully her own. One afternoon, Kato's parents showed up at her small studio unannounced, dressed in their finest clothes and wearing wide smiles that felt forced. "Kato, we've been thinking, we were wrong before. We want to make it right," her mother said, her voice soft but calculating. Her father added, "We see now how much you did for us. Let's start fresh. We want to honor your sacrifices." Kato felt a familiar pang in her chest, a mix of anger and old longing. For a moment, she remembered the years of sleepless nights, the endless work, the food she skipped so they could eat, the debts she paid while they celebrated nothing but her absence. She listened politely, nodding slightly, letting them speak, but inside, her mind ran through every memory. She thought of the nights she had returned home exhausted, only to be ignored or belittled. She remembered the promises they never kept and the gratitude they never gave. Their words now felt like an attempt to claim a part of her life she had already taken back for herself. Kato smiled faintly, her expression calm, because she had learned something her parents had not. She didn't need their approval anymore. Her parents' pride clashed violently with Kato's independence. They tried to charm her with gifts, compliments, and reminders of the past, but she could see through it. She could feel the tension, the invisible tug-of-war between their desire to control her and her refusal to return to the girl they once dismissed. They expected her to fall back in line, to forgive easily, to let them back into her world. But Kato had changed. She wasn't the exhausted, desperate child they had once ignored. She was a woman who had fought her way out of neglect, who had built something meaningful with her own hands, who had finally tasted freedom and respect on her own terms. In that quiet, tense room, Kato realized something powerful. Forgiveness was her choice, not an obligation. She could acknowledge the past, but she didn't have to allow them to manipulate her emotions or reclaim control over her life. She didn't need their praise, their validation, or their approval to feel successful. Their words, their charm, their pride, they had no power over her anymore. As they left, fuming and confused, Kato felt a quiet satisfaction well up inside her. Her growth, her independence, her achievements, they were hers alone. No one could take them away. And in that moment, she understood the true victory. It wasn't about making her parents see her worth. It was about knowing it herself, standing tall, and finally being free from the shadow of their neglect. She smiled to herself, a small, powerful smile, because she had won in the only way that mattered, by living her life on her own terms. Kato's little art business, once quiet and modest, began to attract attention far beyond her small city apartment. A local magazine featured her story, highlighting how she had built her life from nothing with hard work, talent, and determination. Soon, invitations arrived to speak at art galleries, teach workshops at conferences, and share her journey on entrepreneurial panels. People were curious about the young woman who had spent years sacrificing for ungrateful parents and yet rose stronger, turning her passion into a thriving business. Her parents caught wind of it quickly. They saw her name in articles, watched her videos online being shared hundreds of times, and heard others talking about her achievements. For the first time, they realized that the girl they had ignored, dismissed, and belittled was now someone influential, admired, and unstoppable. They tried subtle comments and indirect questions, hoping she might seek their approval, but Kato had changed. She smiled politely when her parents mentioned her success, but inside, she knew they had no power over her life anymore. Their wealth, their pride, their past control. It all felt empty compared to what she had built with her own hands. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers reached out to Kato, inspired by her story. They admired her resilience, her talent, and her ability to persevere when the world seemed against her. Messages poured in, praising her determination and honesty, showing her that her struggles had meaning beyond her own life. People were learning from her journey that success earned through effort and integrity shined far brighter than any inherited wealth or sudden luck. Amari, her billionaire partner, noticed how Kato navigated her newfound attention with grace and ingenuity. He expanded her opportunities further, connecting her with international galleries, global clients, and collaborations that placed her work on stages she had only dreamed about before. Kato's reputation grew beyond borders, and her influence as an artist and entrepreneur spread quickly. She began traveling to new cities, speaking at panels, and sharing her story to encourage others to fight for their dreams. Meanwhile, her parents watched silently, feeling a strange mix of regret and helplessness. They had underestimated her for so long, thinking she was dependent, fragile, and unimportant. Now they saw clearly that the very person they had dismissed was thriving without them, building a life richer than anything they could buy. Their regret simmered quietly. They could no longer influence her choices, her achievements, or her path. Kato, however, didn't focus on their feelings. She felt a quiet pride in herself, in the life she had created, and in the inspiration she now provided to others. Every recognition, every invitation, every message was proof that she had risen above neglect and doubt. She had built a reputation, a career, and a legacy on her own terms. And the world was finally noticing. Kato didn't feel the need to announce her success to the world. She didn't post expensive cars or lavish vacations, and she avoided the flashy displays her parents had loved so much. Instead, she focused quietly on growing her business, investing in new ventures and learning everything she could about managing her finances. She made smart, careful decisions, putting money into projects that would multiply her wealth and strengthen her independence. She also donated selectively to causes she believed in, helping people without expecting attention or gratitude. Each move was deliberate, a way to build a life her parents could never influence or take over. She built strong networks of clients, artists, and entrepreneurs who respected her for her talent, work ethic, and intelligence. Slowly, she became untouchable, financially secure and socially influential in ways her parents could never reach. They tried subtle hints, indirect comments, and even gifts to lure her back into dependence, hoping she would acknowledge them or seek their approval. But Kato had learned to protect herself. Their attempts had no effect. She listened politely, smiled when necessary, but kept her life firmly in her own hands. Their pride, their pressure, their past control, it all bounced off her like water off stone. The satisfaction she felt wasn't about seeing them embarrassed or regretful. It was deeper, quieter, and far more meaningful. Every email from a happy client, every new commission, every message from someone inspired by her story reminded her that she had built something lasting on her own terms. Every smart investment, every successful collaboration reinforced her independence. This was her revenge, not through confrontation or drama, but through living fully, boldly, and unapologetically. Her life itself became the answer to all the doubts, dismissals, and neglect she had endured. She didn't need to argue, prove, or show off. Each day she woke up in her studio, painted, taught, created, and expanded her world, and that alone spoke louder than words ever could. The quiet power of her success, the unshakable control she held over her life, was a statement her parents could neither challenge nor ignore. Kato realized that true triumph didn't come from forcing others to recognize your value. It came from knowing it yourself and building a life that reflected it. Her parents' attempts to intervene only reminded her how far she had come and how independent she had become. In that silence, in her focus and her achievements, she experienced the sweetest revenge possible. A life free from the constraints, manipulation, and indifference of those who had once tried to control her. Kato's quiet victory was complete, and the satisfaction it brought her heart was rich than anything they could ever understand or take away. Kato sat in her art studio, the city skyline stretching out before her like a sea of lights and possibility. Canvases leaned against the walls, sketches were pinned up, and her laptop and tablet hummed quietly with the business she had built from scratch. She leaned back in her chair and let her eyes wander over everything she had accomplished, the projects she had completed, the workshops she had taught, the partnerships she had forged. Each piece, each connection, was a reminder of the long path she had walked alone, and the strength it had taken to get here. Her mind wandered back to the years of exhaustion, the endless jobs she had taken to keep her family afloat, the nights she had cried herself to sleep, and the times she had hoped her parents would notice. She remembered the betrayal, the cutting off, and the sharp sting of being ignored after giving so much. And yet, sitting here now, she realized how every struggle had shaped her, made her smarter, stronger, and more determined. The pain had been real, but so had her growth. She smiled faintly, knowing that the lessons had been worth the hardship. She thought of her parents and their lottery winnings, a fortune that could never match what she had built for herself. Their sudden wealth had brought them happiness, but it had not brought them wisdom, respect, or skill. What she had earned, her independence, her creativity, her reputation, was irreplaceable. Kato understood that true success could not be bought. It had to be created, nurtured, and earned. Turning slightly, she looked at her phone and saw a message from Amara, checking in as always. Kato whispered softly, almost to herself, "I lost nothing by walking away. I gained everything by standing up for myself." It felt like a release, a truth she had carried silently for years finally spoken aloud. Her triumph was not flashy or loud. It didn't need to be. It was steady, earned with grit, integrity, and unwavering effort. For the first time, she felt fully at peace. Everything she had, every opportunity, every success, was hers alone. She hadn't needed her parents' approval, their recognition, or their support to become the woman she was. The life she had built was entirely hers, crafted with patience, courage, and vision. And as the lights of the city twinkled below, Kato leaned back, breathing deeply, letting the satisfaction and pride wash over her. This was her ending, her choice, and it was perfect. She had turned every hardship into strength, every betrayal into motivation, and every doubt into proof of her own power. Her story, her triumph, her life, it was hers forever.